welcome to Clamp, the weekly podcast where we talk about all things related to creating, living, and making projects. I'm your host, Grant Alexander, and joining me as always is Adam Mackey. This week, we have a special guest. If you follow him, your blacksmith shop is guaranteed to be free from computer viruses. He knows when to call a spade, but he's still sometimes foolish with his tools. Let's give a warm ahoy to Brett from Skull and Spade 13. Welcome.
That might be the best intro I've ever had.
Oh, thank you.
I love your intros.
Yeah. That's you guys can all thank Tony Langer because he said you should do something to actually introduce people, not just say their name. So I started doing something like this. But
every time we have a guest, our guest compliments you on your intro. So you're doing something right.
They're good.
Thank you. So Brett, tell everyone who doesn't know who you are, who you are, and what you do.
Or my name is Brett McAfee, and I am a pirate, and that's it. Oh, no. I do making. I make lots of things, and officially, I don't know, maybe a year ago, I started making things full-time for myself, self-employed, the whole shebang. And I kind of tout myself as an artist blacksmith, even though I don't necessarily like the term artist because it feels a bit floofy. Although multiple talks with friends and close confidants of mine, I'm pretty sure what I do should be considered artistry. I do have an affinity for blacksmithing and moving steel and metal around, a lot of fabrication stuff. But I would say I have a pretty general competency of making and making.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you create videos and
I do make videos.
Adventure Time. Yeah.
Adventure Time?
No,
I'm just going to talk about how I like Adventure Time.
I was thinking the Maker video game. What's it? What do you call it?
The Maker Adventure. Yeah.
Yeah, the Maker Adventure.
Yeah, I made my own video
adventure
game
and put time. I don't know.
I still wish that was a playable game. Doesn't have to be me. I just want a video game that looks exactly like that, where it's all retroized, but it just utilizes people from the maker community, and all their special abilities are stuff that they've made.
That sounds like an amazing thing, and I think if you mentioned it on the much bigger podcast, Fools with Tools, that's something that you could probably reach out to people who would do it, especially if you'd share your files that you've already made.
My After Effects files are bonkers. No one needs to see that stuff. You know how you guys do file management, or how we all pretend that we do file management on the files that we create? Well, I made the first Skull and Spade Maker Adventure file and then just continued building on it without file managing anything. So now After Effects files are supposed to be just a lot of references, and they're very small kilobyte counts or megabyte counts. Now the thing's like 1.5 gigs, and my computer hates it.
Oh God. Well, I'm sure someone will reach out and make that a reality. I made a video game when I was in high school, so it can't be that hard. Like,
can't be that hard. Pong seems so easy, right?
Yeah. I made a racing game when I was in high school. It was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But I could not do it again today because it's been 20 years since I've coded. But anyways, you mentioned that you recently, in the last year, took a leap of faith, believing in yourself to start a full-time makery. And before that, you've taken a couple different leaps in your life, trusting your gut to do something that you thought was the right move at the time. And that's why we're having you on today. We wanted to talk about kind of like trusting in yourself and maybe how you come to those decisions, because, if you just blindly follow every whim you have, it might work out, it may not. But I assume there's more to it than that. So, yeah.
Well, it's nice that this is the topic that we're discussing today, because I think maybe for the first time I'm able to discuss this openly, but also with a lot better perspective after the last couple of years, because my life was never really I can't consider it hard, right? It wasn't difficult growing up. I didn't have a difficult upbringing. I had great parents that were very supportive. Maybe some minor pressures just from being the last child to go through school. And it was like, we hope you achieve all the things, and we don't we want the last one to be good as well. You know, my sister and brother are fantastic people, but ever since middle school, I was kind of on a different path for a really small town in Kansas, and I drew a lot, and I was a lot more into art, and I was taking higher level classes than the majority of my peers, and I always tried to achieve a little bit more. Call it a not a workaholic. You can't be a workaholic when you're like 16, but I was an overachiever for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that was imparted on me by my parents, but for all the right reasons, right? They just wanted to see me get the fullest experience that I possibly could about anything that I was going into. But when that fed into college, like I went to art school, and 95% of the people that I grew up with, like known since 5 years old, went to a different college in the state.
Right.
And I went to art school, and I met a lot of like-minded people, and then realized like, oh man, I used to think I was pretty good at painting, but all these people are way better than me at painting.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a reality check, but also I appreciated the challenge of it. It was like, okay, now we got to step up. We got to step up to the next level. And that became it just became a regular thing, even when I was younger, but I just didn't have that perspective on it, right? It was like, I got a job right out of college, luckily, and I was working with my brother, but I moved to Las Vegas. So it was like, get out of everything you know. You're going to go be 21 and live in Las Vegas. And instead of my illustration and design degree having anything to do with it, my brother got me an internship job because he was like, you do video editing, right? And I was like, a little bit. So I was a video editor for 2 years. And then I was a food reporter for that same company. And then I was doing food reporting and videoing myself. And then they started throwing me at random shit because they thought my sense of humor was hysterical. Although I didn't understand what my sense of humor was other than just deadpan nonsense. And then that job fell apart. I ended up moving back to Kansas City. Got a job making things, which was really fun, but I was getting paid very little. And then I got another job making things, which paid a little bit better, but it was a lifer job, and I didn't want to sign up for that. Then I went to New York. Then I went to upstate New York. Then I came to California. It's like everything has been this series of learning experiences and kind of jumping in full on, like you were asking. But I think I appreciate the challenge every time. That's why it always is a driving force for me. It's like, what is the next challenge? What is the next challenge? I want to be challenged by something. I feel like I've outgrown this space that I'm in, regardless of whether it's forced upon me to find a new job or a new living space or something. But it's always been this series of challenges, and I love accepting the challenge.
Right. So you put it all into challenge, and I think it's an interesting thing because you talk about going to a new school for art. And I had a situation like this, and so did my wife, where she went to a school for art. I just drew all the time. All I did, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, all I was doing was drawing to the point where I was getting in trouble. And then I thought I was good. And then, like you, saw other people and went, I'm just nowhere from, like, I'm never going to be there. My wife had the same thing. She saw other people and went, I'm never going to be as good as those people. Now, I looked at that and I turned down the challenge. She looked at that and life got in the way. But she's now following like some of those people that she thought were amazing artists, and they're not doing anything different than her. Right? Even though they were amazing at the time. And I'm like, right, if you had just worked every day and took that challenge, you'd be like a full-time artist today. And it's one of those things that I go, it's the same. If I'd continued drawing, my dream was to be a comic book artist in grade 6, and instead of drawing every day, I got to a point like when I was in grade 9, people would actually just say, I don't believe you drew that. and I got bullied a lot. They'd like rip it down off my locker and stuff like that. And I got to the point where I just stopped drawing because it got like I wasn't as good as the people I wanted to be as good as, but I was better than the people in high school, and I was getting bullied for it. So I just stopped drawing altogether. And it's like one of those things, though. Like if I just kept doing it, maybe today I'd be a comic book artist. Maybe I wouldn't be. Who knows? Right? I don't read comics anymore, so probably not. I don't know. It's probably just a high school phase or whatever. But one thing you talked about is you met that challenge and you said, I'm going to take it head on. And I think as I've grown, I do that more. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting that you did that so early.
You say early, and I'll just play a bit of devil's advocate here, because there were guys or I've started to realize more and more how there are some people in our space, in our maker space, that started doing this stuff way earlier on. Like you've got Make with Miles is the most recent one, right? Mm-hmm. Miles is awesome. He's been a fucking sweetheart since the very beginning, since he started kind of injecting himself into the maker world, and he started making friends with people. And he's a young chap, but he's super talented. And recently, I remember looking at my YouTube suggestions, and one of the subscriptions that I have, or one of the people that I follow, is 10 Hundred, who's an artist. And Miles effectively did a video with him, sent 10 a thing. And I was like, oh, so good for him. That is awesome. I follow this guy. I know who Miles is. I follow Miles. What a brilliant thing to be doing at a younger age. Everything that I did and every decision that I made felt like a gut check, right? It was the thing that made the most sense at the moment. So I needed a job after college. I got a job offer. Did I want to go into video editing? Not necessarily, but it was a job. My brother and I got along really well, and I got to move out and have income. Once that job actually in 2008, 9, something like that. Yeah, journalism across the board started to take a massive hit because no one could sell ads on online media, but everyone knew that that's where media and newspapers and things like that were online, and we all got fired. Randomly one day, we all started getting phone calls at our chairs, and we were getting called up to HR and getting fired. And then none of us knew what to do. Tweeted. That's true. But after that, it was I spent a few months just trying to figure out what to do with my life. And luckily I had a friend who got me a really crappy job, but it was a job. And I worked there for a while. And then if anybody's ever heard the crazy story that I told a couple of times, I ended up getting picked up to do this crazy videography job traveling through Africa. And it was absolute insanity. That was a huge growth experience. But I threw myself into that too, because it was at the moment, I don't want to work this crappy job. I'd rather go on an adventure and get paid for it. The outcome wasn't exactly what I wanted. I ended up losing a bunch of money on the project, but I did this crazy TV show and I was filming it, and I ended up directing half the season because a bunch of people left, and it was extremely trying and intense, and I got arrested twice, and fuck, I was so young and I had none of these experiences, and I started to gain perspective on things. Every time I accepted a new challenge, I started to gain experience, and I started to realize that the more I put myself out there, I will put my ducks in a row. I will consider a decision for months before I make it. But if it all still feels like my gut reaction is you got to do this thing, then I will jump into it and I will absolutely give it 100%. To the best of my abilities, right? I think there have been a few experiences in my past where I signed up for something, I put my all into it, but the stars didn't align, or it actually wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or things didn't quite work out the way that I had accepted in my head, which is what led to the decision. But again, I've gotten old enough at this point, and I've gained enough perspective on all these random nonsense things that I've done, that I look at all of them from the perspective of learning experiences, even if they don't work out 100%, right? I haven't held a steady job in 12 years, something like that. And I don't look at that as being like, oh my God, like no one can hire me and like I must be worthless. No, I just realized that the most important thing for me was something my grandfather told me when I was 16 or something. So like 22 years ago, is like, work for yourself. You're going to make less money, but you're going to be a lot happier. And I never knew what that meant when I was 16. Because I was like, no, everybody I know has a job and they all work for other people, Grandpa. But he owned a small little auto yard where he was a mechanic and an auto sales guy for used cars. He never made a ton of money. And then I've told this story before, and I apologize for anybody rehearing it, but I went to his funeral when he passed away, and it was a smaller church, and it was filled to the brim. And there were even people standing outside waiting when we carried the casket out, because that's how big of a deal that guy was. That's how much of an impact he had on various people's lives. And I think unfortunately, it took that event for me to realize what that actually meant when he said, work for yourself, you'll be happier. He touched so many people's lives in this small little nowheresville town, Kansas, before internet and before anything else was going on, that's what that guy's funeral looked like. I was like, holy shit, I'd rather spend the rest of my life trying to figure things out so that I can make some kind of impact and live outside of myself for a bigger picture than have a cushy job, make good money, and hate every day that I go into an office.
Right. See, I think so. This like taking a leap of faith or believing in yourself is like something that I think everyone has their own way, right? And the hardest lessons are learned, or the best lessons are learned through hard work or hard experiences, right?
Right.
Like your grandfather telling you that, meaningless, right?
Right.
Like when he told it to you, in one ear out the other, doesn't like he could have like pinned you down and said you need to learn this. It wouldn't have mattered, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
There's nothing that someone can tell you that will actually make you learn a lesson without a personal experience attached to it.
Exactly.
And you know, I have a cushy job that I got through a random experience of being drunk and losing my SIN card, my social insurance number. I don't know, you guys in the States, social security number. I lost the card with that. Anyways, I got drunk and I needed to go get the new card. So I went to the building and they were doing resume workshops for students, and it got me a job that ended up my job in the government because of that experience. All that to say, I don't think I've ever taken a leap of faith to believe in myself in the way that you do. Because I'm very secure in I've got a lifetime, golden parachute job or whatever. I wanted to like travel to Europe with some inheritance money that I got, and instead I bought a house, which is the way better investment.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
Yeah, but it didn't. I didn't learn it. Like I learned lots, but I don't know. I learned different things. I don't know.
Well, okay. I have to interject into it's the fact that I don't have, like, I don't know how long you've been married or partnered or how long you guys were dating before you were married or what other kind of responsibilities you had, dogs, cats, whatever. But for either of you two, like, it is a typical discussion that I've had with other makers or other people in the community where there's always a sense of that same perspective I keep talking about. It's like, I was able to do this because I have no attachment or responsibility to anything. And that is a massive benefit for me being able to do these things. But at the same time, like, it leads to a bit of loneliness, hermitishness, whatever it is, where, yeah, I can have connections with people. I love having the podcast with the boys, but in terms of like, I want a shop cat. I've wanted a shop cat for years. ever since I hung out with Jimmy and was working for Jimmy and he had Spike and all the animals and stuff, I want a shop cat so bad that just hangs out on the anvil and like sleeps there when I'm not working on it. I can't have one because I feel too responsible for the well-being of that animal to go on random trips like I do, or work the hours that I do, not sleep as little as I do. And there's a trade-off there, right? I'm able to make some of these movements happen, or jump onto some of these crazy ideas of just like, fuck it, let's go do this. Let's go do this. Let's go try this. And that's when I say that's me talking to myself. But my lack of responsibilities is a double-edged sword. Like, it works in my favor sometimes, and then other times it really feeds to this like, fuck, I wish I had something else around, you know.
I can definitely understand all of that, because so my wife at the moment, she's always had issues with like depression, all that sort of stuff, and she hates her job. She only works 1 day a week. She doesn't need to work. The only reason she works was for herself, and I earn enough money to pay all the bills, and that's fine. Because she doesn't have that responsibility, I feel like for her, it's a lot easier for her to be like, well, I don't want to go to work. I don't need to work. She's actually looking at quitting her job at the end of January. And, you know, that's fine. She wants to take that leap of faith. She really wants to start. We always intended on starting a business when I bought my CNC. Never really done it. And we talked about it the other night, and there's like 4 products that she really wants to start off with. So now we're going to look into designing them and trying to get this business off the ground. So she's going to take this leap of faith, quit her job, and try and run this business. I feel like it's a lot easier to do that when you don't have the responsibilities. Whereas me, I can't turn around and go, I want to quit my job and just do YouTube full time. There's no way that's going to happen. We'll be on the street in a week.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think, and to take that back to what you're saying about getting a shop cat, and that is you don't want to have that responsibility. If you didn't have the responsibility of, like, you don't want to go on trips and stuff, then you'd easily just get one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the, that idea, like, I always love the idea that you can have a partner, a wife, a boyfriend, whatever the fuck it is, but you've got somebody else that supports what you do so well. But for most of us, we're kind of bad on the business side, and you find somebody that can actually offset, or you develop this over time where someone's just like, I really don't like my job, and you're doing pretty well, but you don't have enough time in your day to make the stuff and sell the stuff and run the website and all these things. I know enough, let's just call them maker couples or whatever, but I know enough of those people that are able to team up, right? It's perfect support and perfect trade-off where you meet 50-50 and you're like, you are so good at making things and you're creative enough. I want you to do that full time. And on the other side is like, I will handle all the stuff you hate doing because I'm awesome at it. It gives me purpose and I have autonomy. And you're able to put all of your time and energy into what is effectively a team venture. And if it goes well, then you know you're both supporting each other in that same process. I feel like that is so, it's rare that happens. I love hearing about it when it does. I mean, I think the most recent conversation I had with somebody was Christy from Twisted Twine.
Yeah.
Anybody that follows her, like, she's got the Making Your Own Way podcast with the other boys. And I did a road trip recently and I actually went and saw her because she's not too far from my folks. And I got to hang out with her. And
on your birthday?
No one was supposed to know that, but it was on my birthday.
Edit that out.
That's fine.
We have a little Discord.
Yeah.
So it was you guys. Okay, that's who she was talking about.
Yeah.
But Christy and Marvin, like, Marvin has work and Christy has work, but when they do stuff together, it's these joint projects, right? They're working on the workshop together. Yeah. Marvin's doing a bunch of stuff because of the skills and techniques he brings to the project. And then Christy is obviously wanting to be able to do a lot of the work that she's been doing and just have her own space for it. So they showed me like their area that they're going to do blacksmithing. And then it's got the loft upstairs and all this kind of stuff. And they're working on it together. And it's fantastic. I love the idea that you can have that support. And for me, even though, I'm not trying to make this sound like, oh, I got nobody. No, that is 100% not true. I have amazing patrons who have been supporting me for a really long time. and I have an awesome audience of people that watch my YouTube channel, knowing that, the last year or so has been a little bit more sparse, but they're super supportive. And I always try and talk to them. When I do talk to them, it's like, hey, I have a couple hundred people behind me that no one else really sees in the videos, or no one really knows about all that often unless I shout them out. But I have hundreds of people who have helped see me through a lot of these decisions in the last 6 years or so. And if it wasn't for them, I would not be able to push forward the way that I have. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to have my discussion with Ben, who's he's so busy. He's too busy for his own good. And the dude's great. But we had to have a talk of just I don't think you need me anymore. And you got so much stuff going on. And I got a couple clients. I think I can make this work for myself. And he was like, you should 100% do that. That's what this was all about. You coming out here and hopefully getting into your own situation. Now I have these clients that treat me well, pay me well. They understand the work that I'm able to produce for them. But still, always in the back is my crew. I have this fucking giant full pirate ship of weirdos and supporters that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this stuff over the last 6 years.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about kind of the support, the internet support that you get is great, but you also mentioned kind of being alone in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, you used to live in New York City, if I'm recalling things correctly. So the contrast between those two things is probably as contrasty as you can get. Do you think, but I also hear a lot of people that say I live in New York City, but I'm alone. Right. And there's people because you're I'm in New York City. Everyone's around me, but nobody talks to me. Right. So now you're in the desert and you're literally alone because I've seen video from your shop. It doesn't look like anyone's near you.
Nope.
So, but do you feel more alone or less alone in New York or the desert?
No, it's definitely out here. Just because the crew and the maker crew dynamic that was out here, everybody's very individualistic, right? So while there was initially this idea of a lot of big group projects and things like that, it just, it went the way that it did. And everybody's busy enough with their own stuff. So good for everybody, but some of those bigger group ideas just didn't quite play out, especially with COVID happening when we all kind of got out into the area. So I don't want to say alone in the way that's kind of woe is me or condescending term usage. I've actually had this discussion with one of my closest friends that I've known for 15 years. We tried to have a discussion one time and find a word, because I don't know that there's one in English, where the idea that you can be in a group of people or surrounded by the city of New York, which a lot of hey, I'm from New York. I love New York. New York, so much great shit going on all the time. There's people everywhere. I understand those people. I've met those people. It's all well and good. But what is the term that one can use that's not alone? Because alone to me sounds very sad. What is a term or a word that you can use for being surrounded by people but feeling alone? There's got to be another word for that, where you're just I'm here completely by myself, even though I'm surrounded by people. Out here, and in my current situation, I am alone, and I'm fine with that. I love the space. I don't piss off any neighbors. I can make as much noise as I want. I can work all the hours that I want. It's fine. There's nobody here to upset. That's great.
Right.
But it is the feeling of disconnect or a little bit isolated, right? I have this place that I've renovated enough to be able to live in, and I can work for myself every day, but there's not a lot of social stuff going on, and everyone's just far enough away where it's not like I can walk down the road to my neighbor. I don't know my neighbors. I've met one of them. One of them grows pot illegally. The other one is a couple that look way too rough and tumble for me to go and say hi to. And the one gentleman that I actually have met is a quirky older retired dude. He's fine, but he keeps to himself. Everybody that lives out by me keeps to themselves.
Well, that's why they live there.
It's fine. It's exactly why I got this place. But yes, that idea of isolated and a little bit alone, and the how do you push yourself, and how do you maintain an upward trajectory when you don't have that push from other people around you? Or I'm kind of leaning back into what you guys were saying a minute ago, where you have the support system around you, or at least you have some relatively proximal people that will help support through your ventures. That's a big thing that I feel like I lack sometimes, again, bolstered by the fact that I do have the crew behind me and I have close enough friends. I have the podcast with Al and Steve, so it keeps me busy and motivated and supported. But yeah, every now and then it's like, fuck, I don't know. What if somebody came and hung out and I had a fire pit going? It may not be the worst to hang out with my ground squirrels during the day, but they go to sleep at night.
So, to think about this, taking this leap, do you think, when you took the leap to go to you're in California, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you went from New York to California. You took a big leap there.
Mm-hmm.
With the kind of understanding that, you know, obviously you took the leap into another job, but there was an understanding of like this group of people you're going to be with. Do you think you did it because you wanted to be with a group of people and maybe it didn't pan out and that's fine, but was that part of it? Was that part of the decision making?
It might have been, and that, you know, I never really thought about that. But when I worked for Jim, it was 3.5 years of like trial by fire, learn everything on the job from a guy who spent 40 years learning the best way to do things, best problem solving, super talented. So get that just smashed into 3 years, which is why I feel like I know how to do a little bit of everything, right? Because I learned from a guy who literally taught me how to do as much with as many different things as I could. But I lived in an apartment by myself, like 25 minutes away from Jimmy. And, you know, he had a couple people at his house and he had other friends, and he's a popular guy, whatever. He always had social things if he wanted them. Otherwise, it was just, we worked all the time. So the idea that I could come out here and maybe be part of something a little bit more team oriented seemed like a fun shift, right? And I had a talk with Ben where it was like, we don't really have a metal person out here, and that seems to be something that you're pretty competent in, is like welding and fabrication. It's just not something any of us really do out here. Be cool to add that in. So then I think it was the idea that like with Jimmy, he knew how to do everything, and kind of like at a certain point, it was like, I don't know what else I can offer. I can just do the same stuff every day. But there's also like 3 or 4 other guys that are beating down the door to try and do kind of what I was doing. Aaron specifically, if you guys remember Aaron was a total sweetheart. He like instantly jumped into that role and did such a good job. And he's got Ryan and Patrick and Rob and all these other people around there. I kind of felt like at that moment it was a good shift to like, maybe I need to go play with another group of people that can utilize some of the talents I learned from Jimmy, but then I can be part of some bigger projects, some larger scale things that weren't necessarily just filming videos for Jimmy or filming client work for him. I'd get the opportunity to work maybe a little bit more on my own stuff, and learn a little bit more from the people and what they were doing out here. You know, Ben is very different from Jimmy in terms of the work that they do and the business ventures that they're all involved in. Like Ben's working on a 86 unit hotel right now made of shipping containers. Like that's not something that Jim's done, but I appreciate Ben's business sense, and he had a lot of really good advice to offer, and it was fun to work with him in a different capacity. And then getting to work on some metal projects every now and then, I felt like my skills were getting utilized, and I got to bring that East Coast knowledge over here to the West Coast. But then it just kept feeding into like everybody started developing, right? Everybody in that little crew initially started developing. I got this property and was like, well, between working on the house and working for some of these clients that want to pay me decent money, I guess I can do my own thing, which is honestly kind of what I wanted to do anyways. I don't like working for other people, not out of any kind of malice, but it's just like, I'll work 20 hours a day if I feel like it. And I run on coffee, and other people have different schedules and different responsibilities. So it's like, if I'm ready to go and it's go time and you're not quite ready for me to work for you, then I feel like it's a massive waste because I'm geared up and ready to go. So I should go work on something else for myself. And then it was like, well, now I need you. I'm like, crap, I got to derail myself and go work on your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that even comes from the office work where it's like, hey, you have a massive project that's going to take you 6 months. But right now, we need to have an all-hands meeting and to talk about something completely absurd that no reason to have a meeting for. And you have to pull yourself away from it. And you're like, God damn it, I was in such a flow. I was working on my project. So now this comfortability of like, no, I think I actually am pretty good about working for myself. I just need to make sure that I have the bills paid and that I'm planning and executing accordingly. So yeah, the leap thing, like, I think it was partly having this idea of a bigger crew, learning some more things from some different people, different lifestyles. I love learning new things. I'm a massive sponge for it. So I felt like maybe with these people out here, it could be a bigger opportunity to learn more about the business side of things. They were all really successful on social media, and I never really have been, which I've now sought a lot of comfort in. But I didn't realize, like, why is that video viral? How are you able to make all these viral videos? I don't understand what you're doing. Like, you're nailing all these things. I've never worked with concrete before. Ben's like a concrete wizard. Let's talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that was the end.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Adam had his hand up. Yeah. Adam had his hand up, so I was waiting for him to talk.
I took it away.
Oh. So
my point went void.
All right.
Oh.
Let's edit all that out.
Yeah.
Because now I can't remember. Because I had something else I wanted to talk. So you leaps of faith, believing in yourself. So now you went and bought a house. Mm-hmm. This is another thing. You didn't just buy a house. You bought like a cottage, for lack of a better, like a cabin, not a livable house.
Right.
And I think, I don't know if you took a leap of faith or it was ignorance. I don't know which one. Because
probably
it seems like
a little column B.
Right. Like, just based on the stories over the last couple of years, it seems like there was a lot of, I don't know what I'm doing here. But you and now you're living in it, so that's great. But you definitely just, I think you just kind of like, I think you look at it and you go, I can do anything if I want to. And I think a lot of people take that attitude too. And then also at the end of it go, but I don't want to. For whatever reason, at the end, they just go, I'm not going to do it. They don't believe in themselves. So if you could give, with all of your experiences, kind of wrapping it up, if you could give like one bit of advice, what's the biggest thing you can say to people to make them either analyze the situation better or believe in themselves better?
I've been keeping this a little bit to myself. This is probably a good place to say this because I'm a big fan. I used to work in marketing. I'm a big fan of like marketing, trying to get the words out and trying to tell your story in a concise fashion. Also used to work in design. It's all about giving the story in one punch image. So big build up. Anyway, you know, the word fearless. Mm-hmm. It's one word, but cut it in half. And I like to tell people, fear less.
I like it.
Be less fearful of the things that you have fear developed from, because you're way more capable. I think people as a species are way more capable of what society or whatever. I don't want to get on another bigger soapbox on just like, oh, the world is terrible. It's not. But I think the maker community is an extremely, extremely good example of what it means for people to be more capable of what we were kind of being conditioned into. Everything being mass produced. You can buy everything online. You can do all this stuff. Our community has grown over the last few years, and we've seen more people being more capable of more things than I think like the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s were really giving credit to. a lot of that is the ability to share and the stuff that we have on social media. It's fantastic that we can talk back and forth and chat about different tips, tricks, and techniques that we do. But we were like told, you have to hire an electrician for these things. You have to hire a plumber for these things. You have to, why would you ever blacksmith? That's a dying art. Or fine woodworking. Who the fuck cares about dovetails and cabinetry anymore? Build them out of MDF. They'll hold. Whatever the hell has been injected into you for the majority of at least my life, which was just like, why would you ever do that? There's somebody out there that you can pay to do that. I understand and respect tradespeople. My brother-in-law works for a union. I don't want to go climb power lines during inclement weather and hook power back up to people. That is something I do not want to do. I am glad he does that and I don't have to. But I bought this cabin, and just another example of what we're talking about. I didn't know anything about house wiring. I didn't know anything about plumbing. I like maybe enough to go, yeah, you plug that into that and so hopefully you get power. But now I can have intimate discussions about the difference between a 15 amp outlet and a 20 amp outlet and what a GFCI is and why you should use it and what series it needs to be injected into. And I'm trying not to sound too egotistical or narcissistic about this, but I think something, either it was my parents or my more distant relatives and family. My grandma's an awesome example. My grandma would just like never let me fucking stop from anything. And you talk to her, which I did a couple weeks ago. She's 98 and she'll still tell you the stories about how she was like 6 years old carrying milk for 2 miles back to their house. And you're like, we never even had to do anything like that. We complain about something taking too long coming from Amazon or like a tool not working correctly. And I think the idea of like gain some fucking perspective, realize what you're capable of doing and understand that like working hands or not to make a pun on the other podcast, but like whether you are abled or you have any kind of different ability or anything like that, you have restrictions on it. I've met and talked to and witnessed more people being able to do more when the odds are stacked against them societally in the last few years than I think I ever like witnessed prior, or at least just took notice of. Maybe I never noticed it before, but the fact that I never thought I'd be in blacksmithing. Metal made no sense to me. When I was growing up, steel was, you couldn't break steel. You couldn't cut it. You couldn't move. Like, how the hell steel is the strongest thing on the planet? How do you even do that? And now, like, I spent the entire day cutting steel with an angle grinder, and I'm good at an angle grinder. It's like I can fucking cut whatever I need. And now I'm going to weld it together and beat it into shape, and I'm going to heat it and do all these things. That was a fear for me 6 or 7 years ago. And now it's like, it's so typical. It's so typical for my day to wake up and go, I'm going to heat metal. I'm going to beat the piss out of it. And it's going to look like what I want it to look like at the end of the day. Fear less things.
So I have been for the last, 6 months to 12 months, I've been talking, and I've mentioned it on here a few times, about a book that I wrote, a children's book that I wrote that I want to get published. Yeah. And I keep putting it off, and I came to realize that it was fear stopping me. I was worried that people were going to judge me and say that it's a shit book and that it doesn't, and all this stuff. And over the past 2 weeks, I've been talking with a couple of publishers, trying to work out how much it's going to cost and illustrations and all that sort of stuff. And I've almost finally got down to the price that it's going to be. And then I'm going to be putting it on Kickstarter. And that Kickstarter, I think, is me getting past that fear point, because I'm at that point now where it's like, I don't care if people don't like it. If you don't like it, don't buy it. So hopefully, though. Yeah, go on.
I think Kickstarter is a fear mitigation technique for people. That's what I think Kickstarter is. You can, sometimes it's a way to actually get the funding, but a lot of times people do Kickstarters, they have the money and they're worried about it and they're fearful that they'll lose a bunch of money. And so Kickstarter is a fear mitigation technique. It's a testing of the waters. Does someone want this thing or not? It's also a marketing technique. Like, there's a lot to it, but I think a big part of it is. It's fear mitigation.
But that's exactly right. So I can go put out the $9,000 to get the illustrations and the publishing done, or I can put it on Kickstarter, and if I make that $9,000 in sales, okay, I pay the $9,000, I get it published, everyone gets their book, and everything's all good to go. Whereas if I don't make it, I was never going to make that money back anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I've saved myself that trouble of the book not being where I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as you said, that takes a lot of the fear away. I'm not worried about I'm going to put all this money in that I'm just going to lose it.
Yeah. This is a prime example too, and I'm not the best person to be talking about finances and money situations, because I feel like I've been scrounging for the majority of my adult life. But I had a really good talk with that same buddy of mine. We chat very often. And he's doing pretty well for himself, but he dumbs things down for me sometimes in such a healthy way. And it's kind of how we talk to each other. We always try and find an analogy or some kind of like lowest common denominator, how to talk about a subject. And when it comes to money is the elephant in the room of almost every conversation when it comes to fucking everything about life, right? Can you buy a house? Can millennials afford a house?
100%.
No, everything's different. Like money is just, it will constantly be there. But if you can change your perspective on it and look at money as a tool,
right?
Especially for those of us that are makers, it's like once money becomes a tool, do you need that tool to do the thing that you want to do, to make the thing that you want to do? Okay, how do you get the tool? How do you get the money to buy the tool or whatever? You talk to people about investments and stock options and NFTs and fucking cryptocurrency, whatever. It just gets down this rabbit hole of like nonsense to me, my perspective. I understand. But when you start to look at money as a tool, what you're talking about doing right now is Kickstarter. I think you're right, Grant, in a certain capacity. Like Kickstarter can take away a lot of that fear because at least up front what people are willing to put in for it. And you're not making that massive investment on yourself. But you are already looking at this as being like, I could do it. I could do it right now, regardless of what the outcome is. Hopefully people buy it, but one way or the other, you're finding the tool and then you're using the tool to do the thing. Whether it's your money or other people's, it's still just a tool. The fact that it comes out of your bank account just means that you bought a giant lathe and now you have to figure out how to pay the money back to it, right? How do you make that money back to go back to even if you feel like it was a not so worthwhile investment? But if it's a passion project for you and it's something that you care about and that you want to put out in the world, again, it's that fearless thing. We are capable of finding money, making money happen, and it stops so many people of just being like, well, I don't have enough money right now. Well, I can't save up enough for that. I'll bring up Christy again. Start listening to Tax Tuesdays.
Tax Tuesdays.
She'll help you. She'll help you a ton. She's got a really good mindset when it comes to how to save and make money and how to efficiently spend it. But we don't think, like, kind of the dumber down version is that we don't think as money as a tool. It's like we have to have enough of it to do the thing. Or at least here in America, it's like have enough of it so that you can take out a massive loan and then spend the rest of your life paying it off and complaining about it, even though that was your decision because you felt like you needed that $60,000 tool to do what you did. But now you don't know how to pay it off. And you're going to spend the rest of your life being like, I hate this tool that I bought, but I guess I'll just pay it off forever.
And talking about like making our way, the other Austin on there, he bought a giant lathe and he's like, I'm going to like mark on the thing every time I make one of these things that I bought the lathe to make. And once I've made, 600 of them, whatever number it was, the lathe is paid for itself.
That is awesome. That is such
right.
Cool
So he was like, that's what I'm doing. At that point, now the lathe's making me money. And that's how he bought. Now I think he's gotten to a point where he's addicted to tools and he just buys them for fun. But, that was part of his business was like, I could either continue buying this product for $1 or I could make it for myself for 3 cents. And if I make it for myself, I need to make this many to pay off this giant lathe. But, talking about money, it makes me think about our wonderful Patreon supporters. And I want to take this second to thank them, especially the F-Clamp level, Brent Jarvis from Clean Cut Woodworking, Vincent Ferrari from Digitally Creative, Scott Oram from Dad It Yourself DIY, Joe Herdina, Lawrence from Maritime Knife Supply, Rich from Lowen Design, and David Wood from DW Wood Builds. Thank you to all of them and everyone else who supports us on Patreon. Everyone who supports us there gets access to the pre-show, which was like 30 minutes chatting with Brett this and we're going to have an after show as well, which might go on for another 30 minutes. And then you also get a keychain made wonderfully by me because Morley's no longer here. And if you want to get all that, you can go to patreon.com/clamp. If you can't support us monetarily, understand completely. Maybe you didn't listen to tax tips on with Christy and now your money's all out the window. I get it. We appreciate if you just listen. We appreciate you sharing and appreciate if you want to write a review. That would be wonderful. And now let's go into Clampmendations.
Clampmendations!
Okay, so I am going to, apologies, I'm going to reuse one, but I think it's because what we talked about in the pre-show and how much enjoyment I'm getting out of these audiobooks, it has to be said. So when I first started the Scully adventure in my YouTube videos and brought Scully in to the workshop, I had a few people that were commenting like, "Oh, you have Bob. You have a Bob in your shop. Oh, it's Bob."
Bob.
I had no idea what they were talking about at all. And it's taken this many years for a friend of mine, Dan, Dandles, works at Yandles, friend of the show. Anyway, Dan suggested that I listen to the Dresden Files, which are a series of books by Jim Butcher, and I believe they're still being written. Like the series is still going on, but it's detective in Chicago. There's a lot of noir feel to it, but also it's all supernatural stuff. So there's werewolves and vampires and ghosts and fairies and all kinds of nonsense. It's been very enjoyable to listen to. It is narrated by Spike from Buffy, if anybody is a Whedon fan, James Marsders, and he does a fantastic job. And Bob happens to be a skull in the main character's workshop who is inhabited by a wind spirit, and it talks to him and gives him advice on things. So now I know what Bob was all about, and the books themselves have been very enjoyable. I've listened to 3 because of the road trips, and they are
nice.
I've maxed out at like 11 hours, I think is the longest one I've listened to right now. So they're pretty digestible. Like they're not very long, kind of creature of the week type situation. Similar to what you were talking about with the TV show, but they've been really fun. Just Google search Dresden Files. You will find the entire series. If you do have Audible, I would suggest spending a credit on the first one. It's really great. Except for James Marsders starts narrating at book 2. So you have to sign up for that. You have to know you're getting into him on the second one.
Fun. Yeah, I just Googled Bob the Skull and it came up. So
there you go.
If you don't know how to spell Dresden for some reason, just Bob the Skull. I'm pretty sure you can figure that out.
That's it.
Yeah. Adam.
My clarification this week is going to be a YouTube channel called Biker Bits. Mark over there, he does pretty much all his videos are on motorbikes and camping and like a man cave sort of stuff and all that sort of stuff. He's based in Victoria, which is in Australia, in case people don't know. And I don't know. I just find his videos are, I don't know how to word it without sounding, I don't know. His videos are very basic, which I like. Like there's not all of this like fanciness to it trying to get people like engaged. What's engaging is just the way that he just is who he is.
Nice.
And and I like that.
Cool. Well, me and Bob the Skull for those watching at home.
There you go.
Yeah, this isn't actually Bob the Skull.
It's so
But
good.
let's talk. I'm gonna actually recommend the person who was my trinket trade from the Fools of Tools Trinket Trade, who received my Trinket Trade this year. I recommend everyone go check out Tony Roleau from Hillview Tool. He's opening up, I think, 100 spots for double squares on January 8th at 12 p.m. Eastern. They are very sought after tools. If anyone's ever checked them out, they're beautiful. If you're at Maker Camp, he had a case with them that you could actually feel the tools. They're way heavier than I expected. I don't know. You got to check them out. They're beautiful. Go give him a follow. I was his 10,000th follower. 10,000 on the nose. So, and he was I think it was a joke that I only needed 9,900 and something to get to 10,000. And he's like, I'll follow you back. Don't worry. And then that was the start of our friendship. But yeah, so go check him out. Today, now we're going to go into the Adam slang of the week. Hopefully Adam doesn't have anything. So Brett, we're going to just put you on the spot. Give us some slang from America that you don't think a Canadian or an Aussie would know.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Americans don't have a ton of slang.
Oh,
you just have to think of something Southern and, I don't know, country-esque. Do you guys know what a crick is?
Like a creek?
Damn it. That was too easy. It's just mispronounced normal words.
Yeah.
I feel like there's not a whole lot of slang because we just use everybody else in the world's words for things.
Well, think about like food. Because Jacob from Other Dog Designs talked about scrapple. And I was like, I don't know what that is.
You guys ever had grits?
I've only ever heard of them. I've never had them.
I've heard the word, but I don't know what it is.
Do you know what dumplings are?
Like chicken and dumplings?
Dumpling?
Yeah, but do you know what they are?
I've only ever... See, this is the weird part about living very close to America, but not being in America. Yeah. If they're not filled with maple syrup, I don't know what they are.
Fair enough. No, dumplings are just biscuit dough. That's all it is.
Oh, really?
I don't have a lot of slang. Yeah, it's just biscuit dough, but instead of being baked, you can cook the dough in... Like when you get chicken and dumplings, there's like a gravy, like a sauce that it's all cooked in. And it it cooks in the stew gravy stuff or whatever. And then you end up with these wonderful chewy bits of carbohydrates. Nice. So that's dumplings.
Cool.
I make some mean chicken and dumplings.
Everyone, if you like this bit, you have to email Adam, or not email. You have to message Adam on Instagram at Maker Mackie and give him some slang words. They can be super local, like something. You know what? Something that's like city specific. That's totally fine, right? Like, what's a sky train?
It can be in another language. I don't care.
Yeah, go for it. Anyways,
what did you say? What's a what?
Message him. A sky train. I don't know. It's a train monorail? In Vancouver. It's like a monorail, but it's not. Yeah, monorail. Anyways, thank you, TF Turning, for our theme song. Thank you, Brett, for coming on. You want to take a second, tell everyone where they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Skull and Spade 13, or you can search YouTube for Brett McAfee, like the antivirus software.
Like the antivirus.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure if you type Skull and Spade into YouTube, I still come up.
Yes, you do. Well, at least you do, but I'm following you, so I don't know. In case anyone didn't know, that was the joke at the top about the blacksmiths and virus free. It's always funniest to explain jokes. So
of course,
I made sure
that's how they work best.
Right.
It's only funny if you have to explain it.
Yeah. It's you can find us Clamp collectively at Clampstagram and the Clamp Tube and Clamp Book, and I think we're off the Clamp Itter. We've decided that Twitter isn't a thing for podcasts, so don't find us there. And now we're going to head into the after show. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Oh, and thank you.
Thanks.